Hello and welcome to another episode of Grin Reviews. I'm Grin Grimsley and I will be your reviewer this evening. Once more, management has sent us a new box game and manual to review, and once more it is of quite questionable quality. Using my vast array of detective skills, I have been able to determine two things by just looking at the box. The first of which being that the game itself is called Surround, and the second of which being that either the previous owner completely despised the box and decided to beat the living crap out of it, or that we have the most careless postman in all of existence. Something that's not quite clear from the footage you're seeing is that the box is also quite sticky, and not in a good way. Apparently the designer of the manual has gone for a rustic look, in that the pages have clearly been exposed to the elements and that the staple has rusted through. Just in case you didn't want your manual in one piece, they've also thoughtfully removed two pages and put them in the box separately. As you can see, the stickiness was not limited to the box alone, and some of the pages are completely stuck together. Let's just say I'm happy that this costume comes with gloves. Miraculously, however, the cartridge itself is in quite good condition and is not sticky. But enough of these shallow observations about what is and is not sticky on the surface. A true reviewer knows that real beauty lies on the stickiness within. So just how sticky is the insides of Surround? Well, very. But in a good way. And I think at this point I'm going to promise to stop talking about stickiness. So let's move on to a cleaner subject matter. To control your character, you grab your pleasure stick firmly and thrust it in the direction you want your character to move. As the colored square that is your character moves, it creates a tail. And as your opponent's colored square character moves, it also creates a tail. Like most tails in real life, it is lethal to touch either of these tails. Therefore, like a noble snowspeeder pilot trying to trip up an enemy AT-AT with your tow cable, and like the name of the game suggests, the objective of this game is to surround your enemy, forcing them to run into your tail. As your increasingly elongating tails continue to fill up the screen, it becomes more difficult to navigate. Eventually, either due to personal mistakes or because you've completely ran out of room, either you or your opponent will run into a tail and die. This death, however, does not end the game, but instead rewards you or your opponent, depending on who's died, a point. 10 points wins the game. Within the game, there are a total of 14 different game variants. Each game variant varies slightly or greatly from the first game variant, which is a variant of all the other variants. From the get-go, you can tell that this game is supposed to be a multiplayer game, because the first game variant is a multiplayer game variant. Both multiplayer and single player have a varying array of various variants. Enough of this, however, let's get down and actually talk about them. The first game variant is the simple one-on-one version of Surround, and the second game variant is simply the single-player version of the Game 1 variant, where an artificial intelligence will replace Controller 1. Both of these game types are a bit slow-moving, and it's a bit more of a strategy game than anything else, especially against the AI, where if you figure out a pattern you can really trick them the same way each time. With a real person, however, it becomes a bit more difficult, and it sort of becomes a complex version of noughts and crosses. Variant 3 and Variant 4 are also the AI and non-AI reflections of each other, where the main difference between Variant 1 and 2 is that the game speeds up as you go. While the AI in game Variant 4 can still be tricked pretty easily, the speed up of the game makes it much more interesting, as it's no longer just a strategy game but also a reflex game. If you're wondering why it doesn't look like either player is doing very well in my multiplayer demonstrations, it's because Grim was out of the office, so I was playing this by myself. If you're playing it against a real other person, it's great fun, but I don't suggest you try to control both the pleasure sticks yourself. Game Variant 5 and 6 introduces diagonal movements, which adds a huge dimension to the game when you're playing multiplayer. However, I stress multiplayer as there is no artificial intelligence options for Game 5 and 6. Once again, Game 5 has only one speed, while Game 6 will speed up as you go. Game variants 8 through 11 make it so you can move through the sides or the top of the screen and come out the other side. And aside from that, they just cycle through the other things we've talked about before with diagonal movements, speed changes and whatnot. There's not much change there, but the looping is pretty cool, and unfortunately once again we're without AIs. Game 13, however, is completely different, and instead of it being a combat game, it's an art game. You throw aside your swords and pick up paintbrushes. It's no longer a versus game, and instead you're just making pretty pictures. Variant 14 also allows you to do art, however it provides you with a different color spectrum and the ability to move your brush diagonally. Once a tool for destruction, now a tool of beauty. While it's not exactly thrilling, I do find it quite cool, and it's just good fun being able to make pictures on the Atari 2600. It's not something I expected to be able to do, and it's a cool addition to the game. The manual refers to this as video game graffiti. So do I suggest this game? Yes, I do. Surround is a fantastically good fun game, and easily the best multiplayer game I've played on the Atari 2600 so far. And if you're like me and no one's there to play the game with you, these single-player AI games do hold up. But I suggest you hunt someone down and force them to play, because the extra game types like diagonal or being able to move through the top and bottom of the screen is also great fun. So I guess what I'm saying is head down to the local pub and pick up some friends, and then head down to the local video store and pick up a copy of Surround on the Atari 2600.